But there may also have been people underneath, somehow clinging to life. How long could the miracle rescues continue? Not a week had gone by since the great quake in Turkey, when the rain came. Turkish health officials believed that disease could spread by way of water percolating through the ruins, many of which still contained bodies. The rain hampered the rescue crews as well. Unfortunately, there wasn't much work left to do.
Probably the most difficult decision that we have to contend with is deciding when have we done everything that we can and that our operations are over. Usually after about 4 to 5 days, people trapped in buildings just can't last much longer.
Close to the epicenter, this was once the site of 3 blocks of apartment buildings. Journalist Duygu Senem returns with a cousin to the place where her family was trapped under the rubble. For 4 days after the earthquake, she was here, helping pull 14 people to safety.
We could still hear voices from the rubble. People screaming, crying out for help, but we couldn't do anything without the proper equipment.
Duygu's hope that aid would arrive kept her going. But the disaster was so large that help was needed in 1,000 places. The voices began thinning out. By the 4th day, equipment finally arrived. But a growing stench was coming from the rubble.
They took my mom out. I was on tranquilizers, so I was calm. They recovered my dad's body after a little while. They said I shouldn't see him. He was in a bad condition. We took them to the cemetery. Then we buried them. Now they are gone.
Along with her mother and father, Duygu also lost a brother to the earthquake. For other victims, there were no relatives to claim their remains. Unidentified bodies were taken to an ice skating rink. They were buried in mass graves. Lime covered the bodies to help them decompose. The scale of the disaster was finally becoming clear. Over 17,000 confirmed fatalities. 20,000 missing and feared dead. An estimated 1 million people either homeless or too afraid to sleep indoors. In the days following the quake, the Fairfax County team saved 4 people. The Akut volunteer team, which had been on the scene immediately, saved an estimated 200 people. Before the earthquake, Iskender and his comrades were barely known. Suddenly, they were celebrities.
I love them. I love all of them. They are fabulous.
This was a terrible tragedy, but I suppose one's always looking for something positive. And the body that really sort of represented this new sense of social responsibility was this group of mountaineers who actually were there. They were prepared. They were digging in the rubble. They appeared to know what to do when the state didn't know what to do.
The young heroes were soon off to yet another disaster. An earthquake in Greece, which struck 1 month after the Izmit quake. As rescue operations ended in Turkey, the scientific work began. It is arguably even more important. Only after an earthquake can rescue crews save lives. Scientists and engineers can help prevent tragedy before the earth begins to shake. The torch had been passed to a new group of lifesavers. April 2000. 7 months after the Izmit earthquake, geophysicist Ross Stein returns to Turkey for the 4th time. For all the technology of his trade, he still relies heavily on his trusty notebook.
Scientists are supposed to keep records of everything they do that aren't destroyed, that are dated. So you know exactly what you thought and when. And also, since I work for the government, anybody could demand all of my information and expect to receive it. You know, my book is your book.
Stein is in Turkey on a mission to continue decoding the secrets of the North Anatolian Fault and to see if he can carry answers to his home ground of California.
The North Anatolian Fault in Turkey and the San Andreas Fault in California are sisters. They slip at the same rate, they're the same length, they're similarly straight, and they're the same age. The really only important difference is that while the San Andreas has knocked off only 2 large earthquakes this century, the North Anatolian Fault has suffered 12. And that means that we must go to the North Anatolian Fault if we're going to understand earthquake interaction.
Stein and his colleagues had forecast the Turkey quake after studying the North Anatolian Fault. Now he'd like to do similar studies in California's San Andreas Fault. But the fault in Turkey, which runs right through this forest, is much better understood. While California's written record of earthquakes goes back only 200 years, Turkey's record is 2,000 years old, and it's peppered with accounts of the damage they caused. An earthquake in the year 554 AD partially collapsed the architectural masterpiece, the Hagia Sophia. From historical records, scientists can estimate how frequent earthquakes were in the past, making it possible to calculate their recurrence today. But if earthquakes are common here, why aren't buildings stronger? After the disaster, it became a criminal issue. Many people had lost family members and wanted justice. As the population boomed in northwest Turkey, builders have raced to keep up with the demand for housing. Istanbul exploded from less than 2 million in 1960 to almost 12 million today. Some contractors allegedly used poor quality materials. Perhaps most troubling was that newer buildings had suffered more than older ones. Lack of resources is one reason. Home loans are expensive, so many have just enough money to build, but not enough to do it safely. Turkey has modern building codes, but they weren't strongly enforced. Ross Stein and seismic engineer Mehmet Çelebi, a damaged Turkish apartment building.
Here's a perfect example of an inadequately designed column. Okay.
The scientists are examining the structure for potentially fatal weaknesses.
So the fact that this wall is so thin, I mean, look how thin it is,
Right.
supporting the whole 4-story building is a problem, and the fact that there's no rebar in it, there's very little cement in it.
Right.
When the ground moved, this column shifted, and now needs the help of these pipes to support the building. It won't be enough. This type of construction, while common worldwide, is vulnerable. The walls are thin, so most of the burden is placed on the columns. With proper steel reinforcing, they could do the job. But steel is expensive in Turkey, and builders often don't use enough. When the ground shakes, the columns fail. The first floor pancakes down. The rest of the building follows. The building is being repaired, but in a patchwork manner. It will still be vulnerable to earthquakes.
I don't know whether I want to do this one.
What's that?
I don't think we should go in.
Where you think it's too unsafe?
Yes.
All right.
There was the belief that someone should be held responsible.